All right. Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
Later in the pod, Tommy's conversation with Congresswoman-elect Ilhan Omar, who'll soon be representing Minnesota's 5th District as one of the first female Muslim members in the history of Congress. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Love It or Leave It is back.
Love It or Leave It is back.
There was a musical performance.
Yes, the Women's Center for Creative Work, their community chorus, came by and sang the 12 Days of Healthcare about open enrollment, which you can check out. We also had Mitra Juhari, Jen Statsky, Hayes Davenport, one of my favorite episodes. I did a particularly strange rant about falling asleep on the couch that was not about me.
Okay.
It was about other people's issue that I'm
Love
trying to help them
It or
with.
Leave It is back.
Wow.
Check out that video of everyone singing of the choir. It's
It's
excellent.
great.
And also, open enrollment deadline is December 15th. Go to healthcare.gov. Sign up. Tommy, what's on tap for Pod Save the World this week?
This week in studio, we will have former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro.
Oh, yeah.
We all worked with Dan on the 08 campaign. He was in the National Security Council for a couple of years before heading out to be our ambassador. He was like a mini celebrity over there. He's a really thoughtful, nice guy. And he can talk about not just our friend Bibi Netanyahu and the U.S.-Israel relations, but Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudis, the whole thing. So
Outstanding.
We're going to have a good time.
And Love It, I believe you have some Love It or Leave It touring to talk about.
Love It or Leave It is going on tour.
Woo!
We'll be in all the best places, all your top places.
Top tier markets.
And we're going to announce that this week. I believe they're going to go on sale, pre-sale Tuesday. I don't know. What's the information?
Pre-sale Wednesday, code crooked.
Oh, they're going to go. There's the pre-sale. we're gonna put out all the dates tomorrow. We're gonna put out all the dates on Tuesday. The pre-sale starts on Wednesday. The code will be crooked. And come check it out.
Get those tickets.
Get those tickets.
All right, guys. It's time to get to the news. To sum up where we are right now, I just want to start with a lead from the New York Times on Saturday.
Please sum it up.
Quote, the latest revelations by prosecutors investigating President Trump and his team draw a portrait of a candidate who personally directed an illegal scheme to manipulate the 2016 election and whose advisors had more contact with Russia than Mr. Trump has ever acknowledged. The prosecutors effectively accused the president of defrauding voters, questioning the legitimacy of his victory. Not great. So the Times is referring to a pair of sentencing memos filed by the Southern District of New York and the Special Counsel's Office on Friday that recommended substantial prison time for former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, as well as a court document filed by the Special Counsel's Office that detailed how former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort lied to prosecutors earlier this year after he entered into a plea agreement and promised cooperation. Let's start with the Cohen memos. How serious are these crimes, and how do they implicate Donald Trump?
Well, for Michael Cohen, they're pretty serious. I mean, I believe they outlined 4 crimes, 4 pretty substantial federal offenses. So Michael Cohen is in some trouble. He will likely get significant amounts of jail time.
Some of those crimes were his own personal crimes, did on his own time.
Yeah, private time crimes. I mean, well, the problem for Cohen is that Michael Cohen tried to half cooperate, which means when it comes to the Southern District of New York, he wouldn't sign a full cooperation agreement that details every crime he committed or offer details about all the crimes others committed, presumably because who has that kind of time? You know what I mean? When there's that many crimes, it's like you got to remember them all. You got to get out your black ledgers where you write down the Russian money.
It's like when a clown is taking a handkerchief out of his nose.
Exactly. You
It just keeps going and going.
He probably thought to himself, maybe I can serve out my time in jail, and that would be shorter than talking about all my crimes.
All my crimes. But we do know that Mr. Cohen met with Trump 7 times. And we do know that Michael Cohen met with Mueller 7 times, and that Mueller, from the special counsel's office document, was satisfied that he helped him out with a whole bunch of stuff. So this is a big problem for individual one, Donald Trump, who conspired with him to commit campaign finance crimes.
Yeah, it seems like there's how Michael Cohen was cooperating with the Southern District, and there's how Michael Cohen was cooperating with the special counsel. Those two things don't totally align. Seems like maybe Mueller was a little bit more satisfied with him than the U.S. attorneys in New York, but we don't really fully know. But the way that I was thinking about it was that, we've been waiting to see for so long these three different paths that it can go. There was the obstruction of justice path, there was the collusion and blackmail path, and there was the rampant criminality and corruption path, right? We've kind of been watching all three, and they seem to all coalesce in the mind and actions of this below average New York City grifter, taxi medallion scammer named Michael Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, the government believed that Trump was personally involved in a federal offense.
Right.
In a
I mean,
felony.
and I think
That's a big deal.
I have to say, I think the SDNY prosecutors did a fantastic job in this memo of laying out the story of the crime, the campaign finance crime, and why it was so significant. I thought there was a great section in the memo. While many Americans who desired a particular outcome to the election knocked on doors, toiled at phone banks, or found any number of other legal ways to make their voices heard, Cohen sought to influence the election from the shadows. He deceived the voting public by hiding alleged facts that he believed would have had a substantial effect on the election, and then they accused him of, quote, acting as if the political process belongs to the rich and powerful. I mean, can SDNY do some messaging for the Democrats?
That sounds about right.
I think, John, what you mean is better deal. No, but that's what you see is that there are, career prosecutors, law enforcement officials, non-political people who have been investigating Michael Cohen and through Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, the Trump organization, and what you see is that they are shaking with fury. They're angry about how they're being derided by the president. They're angry about how one of the two political parties is diminishing these crimes, not because they have the interest of Democrats at heart, but because they're in it. They know more than we know, and knowing more than and there are few people besides Devin Nunes who know more than we know who have not come to staggering conclusions about this administration.
It's just funny that all this time we've been focused on Bob Mueller and the special counsel, and it feels like Trump's JV idiot lawyers have too. And now there's this giant looming SDNY case coming down the pike. And we know that Cohen helped out and gave additional information about others who might have committed crimes along with him.
Yeah.
Which means that, I don't know, Don Jr., Ivanka, the CFO of the organization, is in some serious legal jeopardy too, which means while Michael Cohen might not have wanted to spell out every terrible thing he ever did, there's some other people in some serious legal jeopardy that very well could be. And what's what's interesting about all these reports is all of this was documented in news reports for a long time.
Yeah.
And there have been a whole bunch of other crimes in plain sight. They were in the Washington Post about the misuse of the charitable organization. All these other things that are very likely to become, put him in legal jeopardy.
And it is true now that the crimes are starting to have a theme.
Ooh, what is it?
Whether the Russia crimes and
Holiday?
the campaign finance crimes, which is Donald Trump and his associates broke the law and cheated in order to win an election.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a very simple story here, whether it was the campaign finance crime or what we're seeing as a Russia conspiracy. The reason we have these federal finance laws, at the heart of those laws is transparency. If you are a candidate, you can spend as much money on your own race as you want. That is not the issue here, with whether Trump spent the money or Cohen spent the money. You can spend as much as you want. You must disclose the money that you spent. Not only did they not disclose the money that they spent, they actively tried to hide the money that they spent to shut up Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. And they did that by creating a shell corporation and engaging in fraudulent bookkeeping. And they also induced another company, the National Enquirer's parent company, to commit a crime by spending to an influence election and not being transparent about spending it.
Dragging the National Enquirer into this mess.
Yeah, I mean,
Those fine people minding their own business, making up stories about John Travolta's plane.
And Bat Boy. Yeah, I mean, Cohen is in trouble for willful tax evasion, false statements to a financial institution, illegal campaign contributions, false statements to Congress. That's a tough basket of problems. But on top of that, I mean, I don't even know where to transition because there's so many crimes here. But we also know that money is, and remains a massive motivator for Donald Trump up to, during, and through the campaign, because his organization is run by idiots. He's a broke idiot who got all of his money from his father through various tax schemes, and they desperately needed a couple $100 million from the Russians to get a Trump Tower going because he's broke.
They're grifters. You don't have to take our word for it about how serious this is. Fox pundit Andrew McCarthy longtime Trump defender. He's been defending him, thought the Russia investigation is stupid, been defending him through this whole thing. Former SDNY prosecutor said, he wrote a whole piece about this over the weekend, quote, "The president is very likely to be indicted on a charge of violating federal campaign finance laws." So credit to Andrew C. McCarthy for actually admitting that.
And
Honesty.
I also just think Andrew McCarthy is the final hook that a lot of Republicans will hang by before letting go and admitting what they're seeing. I don't know what this analogy is really doing,
Yeah,
but that he is the sort of, I would say, the serious intellectual conservative who has given a lot of cover, I think sincere cover, right? They've allowed them, they believe Andrew McCarthy, they trust Andrew McCarthy, who has tried to diminish a lot of what's come out of these investigations. Now I think it's why there's a lot more quiet this weekend, because the ones they're looking to help them out of this are locking the doors.
You know, I would say, though, give them a minute. I think they'll find a way to be even more craven. I mean, you're already seeing people. I think Rand Paul was out there saying that people commit campaign finance violations all the time. I mean, he's kind of right that a lot of campaign finance violations occur and they're paid for after the fact with fines and handled this way. But this does seem to be a whole other ballgame in terms of conspiring with your aide to cover up hush money. But other Republicans are drawing a line and saying, what I need to see is evidence of collusion with Russia. And I haven't seen that yet. And until that happens, I'm with him.
Well, let's take the campaign finance violation argument, which we're going to hear a lot from people like Rand Paul. And we heard this morning from Donald Trump. He was tweeting this morning about how Democrats can't find a smocking gun with regard to collusion.
Smocking guns.
So now they're focused on what he calls a simple private transaction, a civil case, really. And also, by the way, it's all his lawyer's fault. How is this different than a usual campaign finance violation, like what, for example, Barack Obama's campaign paid after 2012? Like so many campaigns are found that they're guilty of a civil infraction that they have to pay back.
Yeah, I mean, so campaign finance law is a morass. It's a thicket of hard to follow rules that have been built over many years, pulled apart. But there have been political reasons, partisan reasons that have played out inside of these regulations in these laws. And so campaigns have to employ lawyers and accountants to go through everything and make sure everything's clear, and sometimes they make mistakes. Then you have cases where campaigns play fast and loose. We see one kind of abuse going on all the time where people will post huge amounts of video footage on YouTube because it's technically illegal to coordinate with a super PAC, but they want to get the video out there. You see a lot of gray areas where people get brushed back. The federal regulators are pretty toothless. Then you see people like John Edwards who get in trouble for having made payments to keep a mistress quiet in a way that on the surface does look similar to this. But I think all the confusing ways in which campaigns can break the law, all the confusing ways in which there can be interpretations that need to be played out with fines and arguments and good faith actors on both sides, none of that can explain the clear as day case of a campaign saying, we better cover up these affairs because if we don't, he will get in trouble in this campaign and it might cost him the election.
And as we cover up these affairs, let's make sure we do it as secretly as possible,
right.
Not just by paying off women, but by creating shell corporations and then engaging in fraudulent booking so that the FEC doesn't find out about them. Like that is why it's called conspiracy to defraud the United States, right? They are basically saying this is the law of the United States. They want to know what you're spending your money on, and we are purposely not doing it. Other campaign finance, like Obama's campaign was, there were campaign donations made over the legal limit, and they reported them, but they reported them like a week late, and so you get nicked for that kind of stuff. So there's like all kinds of infractions, right?
Bookkeeping screw-ups are very different than
right.
this. But what I really enjoyed about the incident with Michael Cohen is that when all was said and done, he went to the Trump org CFO, totaled up all the crime committing he'd done, all the money he'd spent. They rounded up, they slapped on a bonus, they made up a fake retainer to pay him all out. I mean, they couldn't have created a more clear paper trail of their fraudulent activity if they had tried.
Look, I've said this before, but these people were not ready for national criminal scrutiny.
Yeah, they
were ready for some
County
level
off-Broadway crimes.
These were off-Broadway crimes.
Yeah. All right, so this is one set of felonies. What more do these memos tell us about a potential conspiracy between the Russian government and the Trump campaign?
They tell us that Michael Cohen not only continued to meet with various Russian officials throughout the campaign about potentially creating a Trump Tower in Russia, but that he lied about it to Congress, and, very interestingly, that someone gave him help in preparing his testimony in which he lied to Congress. So that seems like something you do when you're awfully nervous, and your boss is too. But like, in stepping back, we also know that every time Donald Trump was soft on Putin, didn't condemn him during the campaign, changed the platform at the convention to take out arming the Ukraine, he had in the back of his head that he was trying to get a couple $100 million out of Russia. So, and then when he became president, every time he went into a secret meeting about covert action against Russia, a meeting with Putin, whatever it was, he knew that they had something on him because they had been publicly lying about their contacts with these bozos.
And by the way, that's not just us putting this together. Mueller lays this out in the memo, which is very interesting. He says, the candidate, individual one, and Cohen in the campaign stood to gain hundreds of millions of dollars from this real estate deal, which is notable because it was happening at the same time as the Russian government was seeking to interfere in our election, and that was well known. Yep. So he's basically like, you don't draw that connection in the sentencing memo if you're just going to sort of leave it there, right? Yeah. Like, there's clearly something that's...
By the way, the Russians don't need a P-tape to own Donald Trump. I mean, let's be real for a minute. We already know that he liked to get spanked with a magazine with his face on it, right? So, like, this guy's humiliation is complete. All they needed was to know that he had been publicly lying. That means you own him. You own his aides. And also, like, it's not just Michael Cohen's testimony that is clearly saying this, because they wouldn't have put it in these. They wouldn't have put the charges in these documents unless they had corroborating evidence, says every legal expert.
That's very important. This is not just Michael Cohen's word against anyone else.
Who's a bozo, admittedly.
They have emails, they have messages, they have phone conversations, they have phone records, they have all this kind of stuff. No, I also thought it was funny that Cohen had been approached by another Russian national back in 2015 to talk about political synergy between the campaign and Russian government, and he ended up turning the guy down because he had already had Felix Sater and the other Russians on the real estate deal. So he's like, "I'm sorry, I already have enough. I'm drowning in Russian connections here. I got too many to deal with."
Turned down the random weightlifter because he had the guy with links to a pop star. This is so dumb. They're so dumb.
Headline from the Washington Post over the weekend: we now know that Russians interacted with at least 14 Trump associates during the campaign and transition, and all of them lied about it. 14.
It's it's really you step back from it. It's like they didn't care about the country. They didn't even care about the they didn't even care that much about the pro quo of the whole thing. They wanted the fucking buildings. They wanted the money.
That's right.
They're like, oh, you gonna fuck with Hillary Clinton? Yes,
Great,
sweet.
sure,
We're gonna lose. We want the building. I need the money. I want the fucking money. Want me to change the platform? Great. What's the big deal? I'm gonna lose, and then I'm gonna get the fucking money. And then all of a sudden,
it is interesting. That is very possible that they wanted the building more than they wanted the election, because they maybe didn't think they could actually help them with the election.
Well, that's what that's sort of what I always keep coming back to. That like, they come in and they hand them a file. They say, here's what we're gonna go take Hillary Clinton apart. Like, okay, great. So I'll lose by 8. Fine. Can I get the fucking building? Do you understand what my brand is? My brand is that I'm rich. My business is fake. I need the money. You want me to change the platform? I don't care. Put nukes in Ukraine. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, Russians interacted with at least 14 Trump idiots during the campaign and transition. They offered political help, Hillary's emails, business help, dirt on Hillary. They were pushing on an open door. And what's funny is this shouldn't be news to anyone, because right after Trump was elected, a top Kremlin official said on the record that they'd had a bunch of meetings, and they trotted out Hope Hicks to deny that there was any communication during the campaign or any foreign entity, which is obvious and stupid. I mean, like, it feels so long ago, but I remember where I was in my own home when I read that Jared Kushner tried to set up a secret private back channel to hide from U.S. intelligence. It all makes sense.
What is a group of Trump idiots called? It's like a murder of crows, a lacrosse. I don't know. What would you call it? A medallion?
Send us your ideas.
Send us your ideas.
Yeah. So we talked about the campaign finance crimes. We talked about the potential conspiracy with Russia crimes. There's also, of course, the obstruction of justice case that Mueller seems to be building here. We had some more information about that from these memos. I think you mentioned this, Tommy, already, that Cohen was possibly coordinating his false testimony with someone in the White House. Either they approved of it, they knew it was a lie and didn't care, they helped write it. Any one of those is bad. and potentially illegal. We also know that our friend Paul Manafort one of the ways that he lied to Mueller and the special counsel's office is he was in contact with the Trump officials, White House officials, during the time where he had already been arrested. And he was in jail. He was just talking to them. What was he talking to them about? He was also lying about his contacts with a former business partner who is an asset of Russian intelligence, Konstantin Kilnik. And we don't know a lot about that because there's a lot of redactions too. So there is also seems to be like parallel here. There's an obstruction of justice case that's building as well.
Yeah, we also got more details from Comey.
Oh yeah,
Comey's testimony. Comey back blast from the past, playing his greatest hits. I'm great and it's not my fault by James Comey, which sits nicely on the similar book by Hillary Clinton.
Mueller
also interviewed Don Kelly about an obstruction case we found out last week.
Yeah,
what a fun job chief of staff is.
Man, but the Wait, I was about to say something about the obstruction. Oh yeah, but and also the Manafort contact with the White House also comports with Donald Trump's extensive public obstruction of justice, which he's constantly referring to the fact that Manafort has guts because he's not going to be a rat like these other guys, which is like, again, like Donald Trump is picking this up from fucking Goodfellas and tweeting it.
Mueller has a lot of information we don't know, and there could be a lot of bombshells. I think the area of crime where there might be the fewest bombshells is in the obstruction of justice. Like, I don't know how he's going to do this. He's going to write it up in a memo, but most of it's just going to be like, you all remember that tweet.
Yeah.
You all remember that thing that was reported. You remember when he sat with Lester Holt and obstructed justice on national television. Like, I don't know. Maybe it would be, but I don't know that part would be the biggest surprise. All right, let's talk about what happens next. The Democrat who will soon be in charge of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, said this weekend that the Cohen memos describe impeachable offenses, but, quote, whether they are important enough to justify an impeachment is a different question. What do you guys think he meant by that?
So he's getting a lot of heat for saying that, or at least I think people are confused by it, and it's sort of speaking to, like, are the Democrats too timid? Or they're not handling this properly? I think it is I think the answer is yes, but it's a reasonable question to ask. We have to not just make a case that Donald Trump broke the law. We have to make a case that what Donald Trump broke the law in such a way that rises to the level of impeachment. That this is a high crime or misdemeanor, and that it meets a standard that says this is worthy of removing the president. You know, Rand Paul, I think, is very cynical. He is diminishing these campaign finance violations when he says, like, what's going to happen? We'll become a banana republic. We're going to impeach every president. We're going to have to remove every president. They'll go to jail after they leave office. I don't think he's right about that. I don't think Donald Trump is the test case for that. But I think we have to answer that concern. We have to say these crimes are so significant that it isn't just a case of criminalizing politics. This isn't just a case of finding something that we could use to remove Donald Trump from office. But we have to make a cogent political argument that says Donald Trump cheated to become president. His presidency is illegitimate. His crimes rise to the level of impeachment. And I think that is a political case, and he's right to ask that question.
Well, but you just made the case. He cheated.
Yeah.
I mean, remember,
but he didn't say it's not. He's asking the question.
I think remember we had Cass Sunstein on, and Cass was very he was careful about talking about, and he wrote a book on this, what rises to the level of an impeachable offense or not. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Cass points out is gaining power, gaining the office of the presidency through corrupt means is one thing that is clearly that the founders had in mind as an impeachable offense. And what we're seeing now, both with the Russia conspiracy and specifically this campaign finance violation, is that he cheated and broke the law, broke the campaign finance laws in order to win an election. Whereas if voters had known the information that they kept from them through illegal means, perhaps the outcome of the election could be different.
I mean, I can't read Jerry Nadler's mind, but I think that there's a constitutional case and a political case. Mm-hmm. And I think it's obvious that what he did is an impeachable offense and that they should pursue it. But then they're going to have to send it over to the Senate, and there's no way that a bunch of Republicans are going to vote to pull him out of office. So there is a legitimate question to be asked politically whether that will help or hurt Donald Trump during this period of time. We know that Bill Clinton's approval ratings went up during this process. He was reelected, and all the Republicans were mad that they went down this path. So I don't know. But look, if it were up to me, I would absolutely be pursuing these charges in concert with Mueller because I think it's the right thing to do. And I think there's a whole lot of smoke, and we're finding fire every day.
I also think that I think they have to, not just because it is the politically smart thing to do in the short term, though I could make a case why it is politically smart. I mean, let's say that the Senate, as we expect, acquits him on these charges because we couldn't peel off 20 Republican senators. We're still going to go through an entire impeachment hearing in the House where crimes that are clearly much more serious than what President Clinton committed, which they had him on perjury, we have him on campaign finance, whatever happens with Russia, everything else, will be sort of laid out for the public. They will be witnesses. Then there will be a trial in the Senate that John Roberts would preside over. There would presumably be witnesses there. Mueller would probably testify, and all of this stuff. So think about a couple months of letting the American public know what we've seen in spurts over the last couple of years, all of the crimes that he committed to win his election and how he did them, right? So I could make a case that it would be good politics, but I also think there's a precedent you set here where if the Democrats say, because we're worried that it might not be good politics and we're worried that the Senate will acquit him, so we're not going to bring these charges, what does that say to future candidates who can say, okay, well, as long as I have my base with me and as long as I have enough people in my party who can acquit me of these charges, I can commit any crime I want on the way to the presidency and while I'm president?
Yeah, I think that's right. But I also think it's almost like even the political question is not where we're at. Even if you want to end up at the place where the Judiciary Committee is pursuing these impeachment, pursuing articles of impeachment, regardless of whether they can win in the Senate. The question is, what should the current posture be of Democrats in the House? And there's a good argument to be made that seeming serious and being deliberate and saying, I'm not yet sure if this rises to the level, is the right thing to do, even if 1 month from now, Nadler is out there saying this has met the threshold.
Yeah. I guess what I would advise Democrats to do is, I don't think there's a question of whether this rises to the level of opening an impeachment hearing. I think this clearly does. But I'm fine with Democrats saying, oh, well, Mueller's got to finish, because if we're going to bring impeachment proceedings, we might as well get all the crimes at once. You know what I'm saying? Like, I totally agree with, like, hey,
a crime in 9 saves time.
Basically.
A crime in the hand is worth 2 in the bush.
Right. Like, I want them to know that, like, if Mueller doesn't find anything else, what we know so far rises to at least opening impeachment proceedings. But it's totally fine to say, hey, there's a whole bunch more stuff out there, and we might as well get it all at once before we start going down this path. I think that's fine.
I think Adam Schiff has had like a really good posture publicly about all these issues. Every interview he does, he is serious, he is sober, but he is not mincing words at all, right? He just describes what the facts are. The facts are what are on our side, and just describing the facts and taking the facts seriously and letting those lead you towards your conclusions, I think, is the best thing to do.
And the fact that he stated over the weekend is the day Trump leaves office, he could be indicted.
Well,
which is like, okay, yeah,
no,
cool.
So I wanted to talk about that. Yeah, he said there's a very real prospect that on the day he leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him. That he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time. If Trump knows that re-election is a guarantee that he'll avoid potential jail time, what does that mean for 2020?
Yeah, I would say that when Donald Trump became president, there was something that terrified me more than anything else, and it was the period of time between Donald Trump believing he will no longer be in power and the day he actually leaves office.
Yeah.
That period of time has always, to me, been the most frightening, and it's starting to become clear that we are maybe inexorably driving towards that moment, and with incredible legal jeopardy hanging over his head.
Yeah. I would tell everyone to check out Brian Beutler's a great piece on this on Crooked.com today about this, because it's like we know Donald Trump's going to act crazy to try to stay in office anyway in 2020, and if he has the prospect of jail time hanging over his head.
Yeah, I mean, this is partly why
literally lock him up might be a real thing.
Yeah, and it's Donald Trump is not disciplined. He's all the bad things we know that he is, but he's also a survivor, and I look at the outcomes where we're heading. Right, that he can resign, he can be impeached and removed, he can be defeated in election, and I don't know which of those three we're heading towards. But to me, I try to remember that the single most important thing is removing him from office, and it's not removing him from office with justice at the end of it. That I look at this and I see so many outcomes, and to me the least likely is one in which everything wraps up with a bow. And I think of Mike Pence and I see him, And I just feel, looking at him, that he's a person who was put on this earth to pardon Donald Trump, that his every choice and every decision has led inexorably to the moment where he's confronted with that moral choice to make the wrong one. And honestly, I look at what we're facing, and I do sometimes think that it is perhaps the best and safest thing for our country, that the case becomes so clear, his odds of win re-election become in doubt, and we can and by putting the information out there, putting pressure on Republicans, we can get some sort of corrupt fucking deal between Mike Pence and Donald Trump and get this guy out of office, and it will be so unsatisfying and it will be so awful. But the most important thing is removing him before he can destroy the country to save himself. And it's very dark, but I just look forward, and there are no safe or rewarding outcomes to me.
Good times. Good times. All right. So let's talk about all the people that work for Donald Trump. In the wake of the Department of Justice implicating Donald Trump in multiple felonies, again, something that happened. I think we just have to keep repeating that. The president's chief of staff and vice president's chief of staff both resigned from their jobs over the weekend.
And it's also not a big story.
I know. Trump announced this weekend that Chief of Staff John Kelly would be leaving the job by the end of the year. And then when Trump offered the job to Pence Chief of Staff Nick Ayers turned him down. Politico is also reporting that other potential candidates, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, are also sending out signals that they aren't interested. Time to try ZipRecruiter.
It's like applying to be a pilot of the Hindenburg after the announcer has screamed about the humanity of it all. it's like humanity.
We've
where
hit the iceberg. Will anyone?
Yeah.
Will anyone helm the Titanic?
We're looking for a cellist to round out the string quartet here aboard the Titanic.
Do you like a horrible work environment and enormous legal jeopardy? We got the job for you.
Let's start with Kelly. Why is he leaving, and what is John Kelly's legacy?
I mean, Trump has been trying to fire him for how long? I can't remember.
Almost since he started.
I can't remember where I read this, but I might have been the Times said that Kelly was going to announce his departure on his own terms after a negotiation with Trump on Monday to the staff. But instead, Donald Trump, in one last fuck you, decided to announce it before the Army-Navy game on Saturday, just to stick it to him before the couple hours he might have found joy in this world, going to this phenomenal, amazing tradition that America gets to watch. I mean, I was one of the people who allowed myself to get a little tiny bit bought into the Kelly of it all, just because, he'd served for 45 years as a Marine, honorable, and I wanted him to be better. He was awful. He was awful. He was just as extreme as Trump on immigration. His hand-picked successor oversaw family separation. He was one of the crew that scuttled DACA in a deal for the Dreamers. He was bought in, the way he bungled the Rob Porter fiasco cannot be overstated. He sat on knowing he committed domestic violence for months and months. He lied about Federica Wilson, praised Robert E. Lee, for God's sake. Good riddance. The only thing John Kelly did that was worthwhile was firing Omarosa, Seb Gorka, and Steve Bannon. He shoved some awful people out the door.
I'm glad he's a little miserable. I remember that line from the Bob Woodward book when Kelly said, "We're in crazy town. I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had."
So, it's also John Kelly was supposed to be the guy that, knew how to keep the trains moving, and he was going to right this ship, discipline. And a lot of stories in Donald Trump, John Kelly finally met his match. And I find that very frustrating. There have been reports in just even the past few days that John Kelly and Donald Trump aren't even speaking and haven't been speaking for some time. Mm-hmm. We've worked at the White House. The idea of a president not on speaking terms with the White House chief of staff is so extraordinary and so dangerous.
It's literally the first person you speak to and the last person you speak to before you leave at night is your chief of staff.
It's wild.
They organize everything.
Yeah, but the chief of staff he speaks to is in the TV set. It's Sean Hannity.
Yeah, Sean.
He's talking to him. Sean Hannity's talking back to him through the TV.
I hate when my TV dad and my real life dad are fighting.
It also, though, speaks volumes that the guy he wanted is this dude, Nick Ayers, who some reports say
about Nick Ayers.
Trump thinks looked like him when he was younger, so that's, he wants whatever. Nick Ayers is 36 years old. He's just a total political hack who came up working for Sonny Perdue. But interestingly, his disclosure, his filings, what the hell do we call it when you put your stuff?
Financial disclosures?
His financial disclosure forms that you have to file when you enter the White House showed that he has made between $12 and $54 million doing political consulting.
At 36, woo!
I don't know any political consultant that has made $54 million.
He must be so good at being a racist.
Yeah, so
he must have really good racist ideas for ads.
So you have to imagine that he was very worried about the increased scrutiny that might come from this job with Democrats in charge of the House and everything else. I mean, look, it's an awful job. Maybe he does really want to go home and see his kids. I don't believe any of these,
Yeah.
super
whatever. The other possibility is he never really wanted the job for obvious reasons because it's fucking crazy to take this job and it doesn't matter. But he thought to himself, well, I'll let my name float out there because now when I go back to the private sector, everyone will say, oh, Nick Ayers, the chief of staff that almost was but turned it down, right?
Yeah.
So it could be a little brand building.
I think these guys
too.
are power hungry and they do want the job until they can't get it. But
I mean, there's been a dynamic that's been at play in the Trump administration from the very beginning that's, I think, in stark relief right now, which is the Venn diagram of people with the competence, grace, intelligence, and skill to successfully work in the White House and the people who would be willing to work for Donald Trump doesn't overlap.
No.
And it especially doesn't overlap now. Being White House Chief of Staff is one of the hardest and most demanding jobs in the world. And to look at this White House right now and say, I want in, is to reveal yourself to be unqualified.
As we're headed towards potential impeachment hearings, who wants that fucking job?
And it's also not like, look, did Donald Trump make some mistakes? Sure. Is he good at the job? No. But he's also interpersonally one of the worst fucking pricks on planet Earth.
I mean, does it matter at all who takes this job next? The new rumor this morning is Mark Meadows, Freedom Caucus member Mark Meadows, who John Boehner once called an idiot.
I find that one funny.
I love that one. I also I appreciate Mark Meadows looking at the financial landscape and deciding that there's more money in being an ex-White House Chief of Staff than being an ex-Congressman, because I assume that is 100% the reason he's seeking it.
No, but if it's Mark Meadows or a fucking pet rock, I don't think it makes much of a difference who takes this job at this point.
I don't think it makes any difference.
Picture of Roger Ailes on a scarecrow.
I don't think it makes any difference in terms of Trump's agenda and getting things passed. I think if a really impressive person went in there, you might be able to then hire all the slots in the legal team that you couldn't fill, hire some competent press people, build an infrastructure that might begin to combat the nightmare that they're about to go through. But it ultimately doesn't matter. He's going to tweet whatever he tweets.
I don't think there's any person who could come in there and say, because John Kelly couldn't do it, right? If John Kelly was the one who went in,
yeah, but that was all bullshit. John Kelly had no political skills. That was that's why you don't put a general into the White House Chief of Staff job, because you need some political ability.
Right, but he sent the message that we're shaping up, we're going to be a serious place, come work for us, we're going to do it better. And he didn't do it. And I don't think anybody after John Kelly is going to be able to convince people that now the Trump White House is going to run successfully.
Sure. He's terrible.
So Trump also announced on Friday that he'd be nominating as Attorney General William Barr, a former Attorney General from the George H.W. Bush era, and a skeptic of the Russia investigation. What a fucking surprise. Some legal analysts have commented that Barr was among one of the least crazy choices Trump could have made. Yahoo News reported that Trump once approached Barr about being his defense attorney after he wrote an op-ed arguing that Trump was right to fire Comey. Again, huge surprise. He's criticized Mueller for hiring too many prosecutors who donated to Democrats. He's cast doubt on the conspiracy with Russia. He's defended Trump's calls for a new criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton. He counseled George H.W. Bush on the pardons in Iran-Contra. So I don't know. It sounds pretty bad to me. Are we just setting the bar too low here, saying it's one of the least crazy choices?
It's funny. It's just we're trying to improve on Hot Tub Crime Machine, and so I don't know. Who cares? Who fucking cares?
Oh right, we got our title finally.
It came to me, and I was just like, I'm just gonna hand
say,
it.
In lieu of a point about Barr, I'm just gonna say a funny title.
I'm gonna say Hot Tub Crime Machine.
I know. Barr, I mean, everything described, he sounds terrible. It's I haven't been able to summon the outrage yet. And Democrats are saying that he might be a reasonable pick.
Are Democrats saying that?
Someone reported that. I don't know.
I mean, I was going to ask, is there anything Democrats can do about it? Because, we have only 47 votes in the Senate right now. And so if all the Republicans are on board with this guy, and maybe they'll say they're on board because they'll ignore everything that I just said and be like, well, he was a George H.W. Bush guy and he's very respected in the field of blah, blah. And they'll do the Washington thing that they do with so many fucking establishment goons. And then he'll sail right through.
I think right now that we have this, it's a hard thing to think through, in part because we're in this place where we have so little transparency on how the Justice Department is being administered right now. We don't know enough about Mueller's independence versus hot tub crime machine. We don't know what Mueller. It seems as though Mueller's been able to freely do his job, yet we don't know if there are things we're not seeing, reports we're not finding out about, sealed indictments, that whatever. There's a lot of information we don't have. So it's really hard in this space where it seems as though Trump has corrupted the Justice Department, and yet Mueller's successfully been able to release a lot of important information, how a new attorney general sits on top of this, what Rod Rosenstein is up to, what these guys are up to, who's technically running the day-to-day of this Russia investigation. So there's just, I feel like it's hard to wrap your head around because we're so in the dark, and hopefully whenever these hearings might be, we will also be having hearings run by Democrats to get some answers to some of these questions.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it won't happen in his confirmation hearing because it's the Senate, but...
No, I know, but at least we'll
And
be
at least
having
on other
conversations.
on the other side, yeah.
Richard Schiff will be taking over, Nadler will be taking over.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Adam
like
Schiff.
Richard Schiff from
What
the West
did
Wing.
I say Richard Schiff?
Yes,
I do that all the time.
That's so funny.
that's a good one. I mean,
Honestly, I'll take Richard Schiff over Devin Nunes. I'll take Richard Schiff. I'll take anybody over Devin Nunes. I'll take some guest stars. You know,
like in the old world,
who played that? Who played Allison
All right,
Janney's?
all right.
Who played Allison Janney's person? What's his name? Come on, you go. I'll add the joke.
I don't think it's worth it.
I don't think it's worth it, man. So, I mean, in the old world of confirmations, like I think you would probably say that, the president gets to choose their cabinet, and he's done the job before, so that's relevant. But then so
Maybe not while a criminal investigation.
I'm not supporting him. I don't like. No one tweeted me that I'm being soft, but then you look at Heather Nauert, who was just named to be the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
I was going to ask you about that.
She was the spokesperson at State for like a year and a half. Before that, she was the host of Fox and Friends.
Fox and Friends.
So
not even midday Fox.
So
Fox and Friends.
Not even prime time.
Just a reminder, I mean, George H.W. Bush was U.S. ambassador to the UN. Henry Cabot Lodge. Samantha Power won a Pulitzer Prize and was the senior director at the NSC. I mean, it's like it sounds like they're officially downgrading the position itself from cabinet level to not cabinet level. So I guess you downgrade the person in the job. But, I mean, they're treating this job like it's a joke.
I was going to say, how serious
She might
is
be
that?
a nice person. She might be smart. I don't know her, but come on.
Yeah, like Heather Nauert aside, are you concerned about downgrading the job to a sub-cabinet position? Do you think that's a big deal in itself?
I mean, it's significant. It signals that you care a lot less about diplomacy and you care a lot less about the UN. But, Mike Pompeo is out giving speeches attacking all these international institutions anyway and, threatening to pull out of them or whatever else we do. So.
Right.
It's almost like, it's like so much of the work post-Trump will be about rebuilding the integrity and reputation of these institutions, regardless of who inhabits them. Like, you get some whatever. I mean, I'll Grease to take this job instead of Heather Nauert. It doesn't fucking matter. It's still going to be a disgrace to have been participating in this administration. And also, one more thing. I'll take a guest star. I'll take Mark Harmon, That can edit in.
Okay. When we come back, we will have Tommy's interview with Ilhan Omar. Now I did that. We could also do the climate.